Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha as part of this program, but I'm going to be starting with introducing you to the program because this is the very first class of a 1.5-year program where I'm going to be helping guide you through 13 books. Essentially, it's 12 books, but it's part of the 13-book series from Volume 2 through Volume 13. And as you're learning and growing in this program, you're going to be able to study with the original words of the Buddha. But in order to get started, it's helpful to understand a bit about this program, understanding what it is and how to get the most benefit out of it. So that's what I'm going to spend the first part of our class doing, is sharing with you information about the program itself so that you can be the most successful learning and growing and developing in the program. And then afterwards, we're going to move right into the Pali Canon English study group, where we'll be able to study the original words of the Buddha as a study group. And then from there, we'll just end our class somewhere around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. We'll be ending. So welcome to all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. Welcome to everyone. I'm just going to switch over to some visual aids here to be able to help me share with you guys the content from today's class. So I would like to help you guys understand the Pali Canon English study group so that you can experience the best results. And as we go, you're always welcome to ask questions, whether it's during this section or when we're actually studying the Pali Canon. You're more than welcome to ask questions. You can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom through the comments section, or you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So the Buddha taught how to move the mind to the enlightened mental state. This enlightened mental state is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings. You won't experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of these feelings and others are eliminated from the enlightened mind. And this is accomplished through training of the mind. And this is why you need more than just meditation to be able to train your mind. You're going to need to learn through the original words of the Buddha of what he actually taught. And yes, he did teach meditation, and that's an important part of your practice that you're going to need to develop and cultivate in order to move the mind to enlightenment. But there's so many other things that you need to be able to learn and understand in order to train the mind to get to enlightenment. And that's why a program like this is well suited for someone who's interested in gaining an understanding of the original teachings of the Buddha. I have multiple programs that I share. I have a Sunday and Wednesday class, which is called the Group Learning Program. And what we do in that program is we go chapter by chapter in this book, which is Volume 1 of the book series. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And over a 7-month period, you're gradually learning chapter by chapter all the foundational teachings that you need in order to develop an understanding of the path to enlightenment. And then a student might move into a program like this, the Pali Canon English Study Group, to more fully flush out all the various aspects of the teachings of the Buddha. I also have various courses and retreats that I teach here in Chiang Mai and around the world as I travel. And all of these things are live streamed and recorded on our YouTube channel, our Facebook group, and we even have a podcast where you can digest this content. All the books and classes and courses and retreats are available at no cost. Even personal guidance with me, you're able to receive that at no cost. So as I share with you about these teachings, it's to help cultivate your wisdom so that you can actually move the mind to this enlightened mental state. Essentially, what the Buddha did is he discovered these 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind. And then he provided these tools and techniques of how to uproot these from the mind. And as you do, you're going to notice the peace, the calmness, the serenity, and the contentedness with joy coming through in the mind. The teachings of the Buddha, they're not about beliefs. You're not believing a bunch of things and hoping that something good happens when you die. They're also not rules or commandments that if everybody follows these rules and commandments, then the world will become a peaceful place. Instead, what he's doing is he's helping you to understand what's referred to as the natural laws of existence. These natural laws of existence are things that are affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And in the unenlightened state, the mind doesn't understand these natural laws. And because of that, it struggles and it has difficulties. We will tend to make unwise decisions that are producing unwholesome results or unwholesome karma, the results of our decisions. So when we're making unwise decisions and we're experiencing these unwholesome results, oftentimes we blame this on other people, or we might think it's good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate. But in reality, it's coming from our own decisions. But with a lack of wisdom of these natural laws, we'll tend to continue to make those unwise decisions and experience unwholesome results. But when you gradually train your mind to awaken to wisdom, you have wisdom of these natural laws, and now you'll make improved decisions. And as you're making those wise decisions, you'll experience wholesome results, or wholesome Gama. The same thing needed to happen with the natural law of gravity, that as we were growing up, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity. And because of this, we struggled and we had difficulties. We fell down, we hit our head, we busted open our elbows and our knees, and we might have broke our toys and things like this because we lacked wisdom of this natural law of gravity. When we were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, we really struggled with this. But slowly but surely, we awakened to the wisdom of this natural law of gravity. And now you might say that we're fully awake to it, that we fully understand it. And that's why by the time we got to 10, 12, 14 years old, we started making wiser and wiser decisions about the natural law of gravity. And because of that wisdom, we made wiser decisions that produced wholesome results. Well, the same thing is true with these natural laws of existence, that they're affecting us whether we're aware of it or not. And when we cultivate wisdom about them, we'll be able to make wiser decisions. Where with the natural law of gravity, now we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and travel all over the world because we understand the natural law of gravity. We're fully awake to it and we make wise decisions. But with the natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught, this natural world around you, the mind still struggles and it has difficulties. That's the anger and the stress and the anxiety that the mind is experiencing. Essentially, the unenlightened mind is living in a world that it doesn't understand. And as long as you live in a world that you don't understand, you'll continue to have struggles and difficulties along the way. So as you awaken to this wisdom through learning his teachings, examining them, investigating them, you reflect on them to independently verify them. And then you practice them by integrating them into your life. And as you're practicing the teachings, you're uprooting these pollutions out of the mind. So as I mentioned, it's not a bunch of beliefs of things you believe, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. It's not going to cultivate wisdom to be able to navigate the world because you're just believing it, because either you convinced yourself to believe it or somebody else convinced you to believe it. So you don't know what's true or false when you just have beliefs. But when you learn something and you investigate it and examine it and you reflect on it to independently verify whether it's true or false, and then you practice it to be able to integrate it into your life and train the mind and uproot pollutions out of the mind, this is where you'll see that you actually experience real results, because the mind is now in situations where you were once angry and sad or frustrated or irritated or some other discontent feeling, and you can see that the mind is no longer experiencing that. Because of the training that you've been doing, you'll notice that the condition of the mind is gradually improving. So this is one of the very unique things about the teachings of the Buddha, is that you're not believing and hoping that something good happens when you die. You can see right now in your current life that the mind is becoming more peaceful and more joyful. So because you're learning now, because you're reflecting now, and you're practicing now, you see the results now in this life. So me as a teacher, my role is essentially like a tour guide. I'm guiding you in what it is that you need to learn and understand and practice in order to move the mind to this enlightened mental state. But it's each individual student that's doing the work and applying the effort and energy to be able to learn and practice and develop their mind. Of course, I'm using a certain amount of energy to share these teachings and help you and so forth and so on. But in order for you to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice the teachings. You're going to need to learn them with eager ears where you're actively listening and understanding. Whereas if you were listening to this class and then your mind is doing something else, like maybe listening to a YouTube video or surfing the internet or checking emails or things like this, you're not going to be able to glean as much results. Whereas if you're actively listening with eager ears to understand what it is that the Buddha taught, now you're going to be able to investigate and examine those teachings. You'll be able to reflect on them to verify whether they're true or false, and then you can practice them to uproot these pollutions out of the mind. These 10 individual pollutions or defilements that the Buddha discovered, they're referred to as the 10 fetters or taints or pollutions or defilements. The reason why the Buddha referred to them as fetters is because during his lifetime, during ancient times, over 2,500 years ago, if you were a prisoner and they were trying to keep you trapped or confined in a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your leg. This was like a shackle and a chain and a ball, and it would keep you confined to a certain area because they would just have an open field, and this would keep an individual confined to a certain area. Nowadays, we have jail cells or prisons that we keep people in that need to be confined. But during those times, they would attach a fetter, this shackle and chain and ball around your ankle. So when the Buddha describes these 10 pollutions, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. And it's through learning, reflecting, and practicing to uproot these fetters that the mind is now becoming more and more liberated, becoming free. Otherwise, as long as these fetters or pollutions are in the mind, it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state where you constantly experience anger and sadness and frustration over and over and over again, and all those other discontent feelings. You might experience broken relationships over and over and over again. You might notice anger and hostility and argumentative talk or from yourself or from others. You might notice the bitterness and hostility in your life. But you can purify your mind and train your mind to eradicate all of this. Oftentimes when we struggle in life or we're experiencing certain difficulties, we might blame it on other people, and we think that other people need to change, and that's how our life is going to become better. But what the Buddha brings your mind's attention to is that the real work begins within your own mind. That when you train your own mind, this is where you see the improvement to the condition of the mind and the condition of your life. But as long as we're wanting other people to change and expecting other people to change, we don't actually see real results in our life. Because as long as we're choosing to do harmful things in the world, this harm continues to come back to us. And with a lack of wisdom of these natural laws, we'll inadvertently create harm. So when we're experiencing anger or sadness or frustration or you're experiencing any of those discontent feelings, this is the mind just struggling with the natural laws of existence. It lacks wisdom. And if we run away from that struggle, then you're just going to ensure that that continues. It's just going to keep repeating over and over and over again because the mind hasn't been able to cultivate the wisdom to overcome the obstacles to now address this particular challenge. But when you turn around and you walk towards the struggle and you work to cultivate wisdom, then the mind can actually overcome that struggle because now you have the wisdom of how to overcome that so that if this situation occurs in your life, you have the wisdom to overcome it. So learning in a program like this is to walk towards the struggle. It's not to shrink back from the struggle and run from it and just to ensure that it's going to continue to happen over and over. It's to turn around and walk towards it and say, hey, I realize that I'm not a perfect human being yet. This might be what you understand, is that, hey, you're not perfect. You still experience anger and sadness and frustration. You're a work in progress, and that's okay. Because this journey to enlightenment, it's not a 1 week pursuit. It's not a 1 month pursuit. It's not even a 1 year pursuit. The Buddha himself took 6 years to be able to get to enlightenment. So it's going to take you some time to gradually train the mind. And that's why we have the group learning program as a 7-month program to really get you started in building a foundation. And then we have this program, which is a 1.5-year program to help you after you've built your foundation to move into a program where you can more fully flesh out this framework of understanding what it takes to move the mind to enlightenment. And then there's various courses and retreats throughout the year here in Chiang Mai and other places in the world as I travel. And then they're live streamed and they're recorded in different places so that you can take advantage of learning in those situations where if you can't attend live, either this class or any of the other classes and programs that I teach, it's all recorded. Because in a 1.5 years, you're going to miss some classes, right? It's not going to be possible for you to attend every single class. There's going to be things that come up. So when those things are coming up, you can listen to the recording or watch the video on YouTube or Facebook or on our podcast. So again, I'd like to welcome all of you guys to this program. If this is your first day starting to learn with me, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see you here. I do have other foundational programs that you might decide to learn in prior to this program. And if you haven't learned in any of those, I teach a 5-day course that's been recorded many times that will help you to build that foundation. And there's playlists on YouTube that you can go to our YouTube channel, which is buddhadailywisdom.com. In a matter of a few days, you would be able to digest the content in those videos to build a foundation. So if this is the first time you've been learning and you'd like to build a foundation first, I suggest you go to our YouTube channel, look for the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment Meditation Practitioner course. You'll see many playlists there. All you need to do is listen to and watch the recordings of just one of those playlists, because it's the same course that I teach every single month here in Chiang Mai. And you can easily do that over the next week or 2 or 3 and gradually build up your understanding in the foundational teachings and continue to learn in this type of program as well. And I know some of you guys have been learning with me in the group learning program or any of the other foundational programs. So now this is like the next step in your development on the path to enlightenment. So again, welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly in any of the other programs that I share. So now I'm going to share with you guys some information to help you understand the program itself, because there's certain little things that I can teach you that's going to help you benefit to be able to get the most results out of a program like this. First, just some of the basics of what the program is. That this is a live interactive program that I teach in person at 9 a.m. here in Chiang Mai at the temple, and I live stream it at 9 a.m. And then I also teach it at 9 p.m. here at home in the home studio, and I live stream that as well. So no matter what time zone you're in, there should be a live class available. And in some cases, if you're in like North America or South America, you could actually partake in both of these. You don't need to partake in both of them, but you essentially have 2 options. The Saturday morning class for me is probably Friday night for the people in North America and South America and Central America as well. And the 9 p.m. is probably Saturday morning for people in that region of the world. But the 9 a.m. is probably inaccessible for people like in Europe, like the UK. They're usually sleeping during that time. But the 9 p.m. is actually really helpful. So I've organized this program in such a way that no matter what time zone you're in, there should be a live class available for you, either at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. on Saturday, Thai time. So you're going to need to look at what time that is for you. And you can join at Wat Thong Yu, which is here in Chiang Mai. That's the Saturday morning 9 a.m. live class. If you're ever in Chiang Mai, you're welcome to join that. And then there's Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube that you can join from as well, either at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. And these 2 programs are completely in sync with each other. When I teach at 9 a.m. at Wat Thong Yu, we start with meditation. And then after we do the meditation, we move into the study of the Pali Canon and English study group. And because of this, we oftentimes only study maybe 3, 4, 5 chapters of the 10 chapters that we're studying that particular week. But when I do this in the evening times from home, we don't actually do meditation together, because oftentimes people have already working on developing their own meditation practice. And I focus on making sure I cover all 10 of the chapters. And when I say 10 chapters, that might actually sound like a lot to you, but a lot of these chapters are only 1 page or 1 paragraph or something like this. If you read all 10 chapters in a given week, it would probably take you about an hour to actually do that reading. So it's not like a really big, exhaustive chapter. They're actually quite short. So depending on what you would like to partake in, whether it's the meditation in the study or whether it's just the study, you have these different options available to you. In all the other programs and all the other courses, I do meditation at the very beginning. But here on Saturday evening, because we have a certain amount of content that I'd like to share with you guys, we actually don't do meditation. But if you're practicing meditation on your own, you don't necessarily need that. You could even do it like if you know I'm starting at 9 p.m., you could do meditation on your own at 8:30. In this way, you'd be able to do some meditation on your own, and then you're ready to start class. So you don't need to necessarily meditate with me at 9 p.m. Thai time. You can actually do this on your own prior to class if you'd like, because it does help you to do some meditation prior to learning. It will actually help you to retain the teachings in the mind, because you'll be able to clear out the mind and be able to retain what it is that you learn and then apply it in your day-to-day life. There's also a Facebook group that you're welcome to join. It's titled Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. In that Facebook group, I post the chapters each day. There's daily posts there from the books, and there's also questions that students ask. And as students ask questions, I'm the only one that replies to those. So it's a great way to get help. You can get help through asking questions in classes. You can post in the Facebook group. You can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance, either live, whatever city I'm in. You can send me a message and we can meet up, at a smoothie shop or at the temple or at a restaurant or a park or something like that. Or if you're not somewhere in the same city with me, you can go to our website and there's a way to schedule personal guidance and we can meet one-on-one in Zoom. So you have this opportunity to be able to schedule as many of those as you like, because it's one thing learning in class, but it's another thing to relate it to your specific challenges. So when I'm teaching in class, I'm teaching more broadly and more generally, going into detail as you guys ask questions, but then you might be interested to figure out, how do I apply this specific teaching to this specific issue that I'm having in life? And that's where the personal guidance oftentimes comes in. But you can also ask those kinds of questions in class as well. There's a video library on YouTube, which has all the different classes that I've ever taught. I started live streaming somewhere in 2020. So I started to record a lot of the classes that I was teaching. And now I'm pretty much recording everything and anything that I'm teaching, whether it's at home or whether it's at the temple. So any of these classes that I'm teaching, you'll be able to pull up a video from the actual class right now that I'm live streaming. It'll be available as soon as the class is over. But you'll also see ones from previous classes too, and previous programs. So you're always welcome to learn in those. Same thing with the podcast. And there's even audiobooks, and there's even quizzes that you can use in order to confirm your learning and understanding. So these things are all available to you. And as I mentioned, there's ongoing support during the program and long afterwards. You can ask questions in classes. You can post in the Facebook group. You can send private messages or schedule personal discussions as you like. And all of this is available through the website. If you go to the website, you'll be able to use that as a central hub to be able to accomplish all the things that you need. So this is what the program is. And then in terms of why somebody might be interested in studying in a program like this, is it's to train the mind to attain enlightenment. What enlightenment is that peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. It's a permanent mental state that you can attain in this life through training of the mind and through cultivating the mind. As you're working to cultivate the mind and eradicate pollutions of the mind, you'll notice that the mind will gradually diminish this discontentedness. And ultimately, by the time the mind gets to enlightenment, it will be completely eliminated from the mind. There won't be any sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, stress, anxiety. All of these and others are completely eliminated from the mind, and it comes through training of the mind. You can experience a peaceful life where as you meet with certain challenges, you'll have the wisdom to be able to face those challenges. But if you don't have the wisdom of these natural laws, you'll struggle and have difficulties. And it's not because you're a bad person or you've necessarily done anything wrong. It's just that the mind doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It lacks wisdom. As you're training your mind to become more and more peaceful and more joyful, you'll notice that your personal and professional relationships improve. You'll be able to conduct these relationships with ease, because when you're no longer bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships, then you'll notice that the people around you, slowly but surely, will become less bitter and less harsh and less hostile. But as long as your mind has these pollutions and you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile, you'll struggle in your relationships. But you can improve all of that through cultivating the mind and training the mind to uproot those pollutions that I've been sharing with you. And then as you're eliminating these pollutions, the mind experiences focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory, because the mind's starting to perform more optimally now. But when you carry around these pollutions in your mind, you'll lack focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. So if you're noticing those kind of struggles in your life, you'll be able to improve that. And you'll be able to get to a point where the mind's focused and concentrated. You have clarity and deep memory. You can stay focused on what it is that you need to do. And you're practicing that right now. When you're listening to my voice, you're having to have a certain amount of focus and concentration. So while you're learning, you're also practicing the teachings by practicing singleness of mind and listening and refining the mind and kind of exercising the mind. It's kind of like taking the mind to the gym where you're exercising it. And then you can use those qualities in day-to-day life. So if I went to the gym and I worked out and built up my muscles, when my friend asked me like, hey, can you help me move this sofa? Yeah, sure. I have no problem. I have the quality of the muscles to be able to do that. And the same thing is true about the mind, that if you're exercising the mind regularly in meditation and other parts of your day through things like this and learning in classes, then as you build these wholesome qualities and you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities, you'll be able to apply those in your day-to-day life. So even in your professional life, you'll notice as you're training your mind more and more, it'll become focused, concentrated, having clarity of mind and deep memory. And then ultimately, the mind is able to eliminate the cycle of rebirth through training the mind to get to enlightenment. As you heard me share, that there is no beliefs in the teachings of the Buddha, including the cycle of rebirth, that you can independently verify whether this is true or false. When we get to volume 11, which is titled The Realms of Existence, this is where you learn how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. And that's going to be about a year from now. And it's volume 11 for a reason, because it's not something that you really approach at the very beginning of your development on the path to enlightenment. There are certain core central teachings that you need to learn and understand before you actually move into potentially verifying the cycle of rebirth. The core central teachings are things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, meditation training, and things like this that you're developing in those foundational programs, and then moving into a program like this. So by the time somebody gets to the point where they're looking at the cycle of rebirth, it's oftentimes a year and a half, 2 years into their development on the path to enlightenment. Because what's happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter right now. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't matter. Right now, if your mind is experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, you need to be able to learn the teachings that it takes to start eradicating those things. And then as you're doing that, you'll see more and more improvement to the condition of your mind. And then there comes a time where it would be wise to approach the cycle of rebirth. And that's why it's in volume 11. But you'll see some underlying things that the Buddha is teaching throughout the various discourses where he's referencing the cycle of rebirth. And because he's teaching you the true reality, he's not just tossing this in there because it's a belief. He's teaching you true reality of what's truly happening in the world. And one of the reasons why he taught the cycle of rebirth is that as you're working to eliminate these pollutions out of the mind, you might actually observe your past lives. You might have memories coming back to you from your past lives. And let's just say you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth at all and that it existed, and that you were eliminating these pollutions of mind, and you started having these vivid memories of maybe being murdered in your past life, or perhaps being raped or sexually assaulted. And maybe you know that that didn't happen in this particular life, but these vivid memories just keep coming back to you over and over and over again. Well, if you understand that these are memories from the past, you can train your mind to let that go, that it's in the past. There's no reason to experience feelings today based on things that happened in the past. Whereas if the mind clings to things that happened in the past, either in this life or previous lives, you might be forming feelings based on those things now in the present moment. But you can train your mind to let go of these things. So if the Buddha didn't teach you true reality, the cycle of rebirth, but he taught you all these other teachings to eliminate pollution of the mind, and you started experiencing these vivid memories from the past, this could really shake you up. But if you understand that it's very normal to experience memories from the past, then you wouldn't be shaken up by this. Then you would just train your mind to let these things go. So getting to enlightenment is to accomplish the benefit of an improved condition of mind, an improved condition of life, but you'll also ensure that there's not this continuous rebirth. And you'll be able to gain the wisdom of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth as we go deeper into the program. The books that we use for this program are part of this Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden Book series. We're going to be learning volumes 2 through 13. Today, we're going to be starting volume 2. Volume 2 is titled Walking the Path with the Buddha. This is the very first book of the book series, at least starting with volume 2. Volume 1 is where there's still the words of the Buddha there, but there's a lot of words from me to be able to guide you along. But here in this particular program, we're starting at volume 2, and this is mostly all the words of the Buddha. This is an extract of the Pali Canon. What the Pali Canon is it's 45 large volumes that are about this big. I actually have one of them right here. It's a really thick, really big book, and this is just one. The Buddha taught for 45 years, over 2,500 years ago, and his teachings are assembled in these 45 books. And they're not organized in any one particular way. They're 45 volumes of books, and here's all the teachings. And there's a lot of repetition in these teachings because the Buddha taught in an oral tradition. That means that he taught without writing anything down, because the technology to write things down existed in China at that time, but it didn't exist in the region of the world that he was in. So he was teaching orally, and this is the way that people learned his teachings. After his death, they did write down the teachings. And when you're teaching in an oral tradition, there's kind of three things that you're doing in order to help people remember your teachings. You're creating lists, like this is why we have the 10 fetters, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 7 factors of enlightenment. Because if you remember, 6 of the 7 factors of enlightenment, and there's one more, you'll really work hard to try to remember what that is. And you'll know, like, hey, I'm short here. I'm missing one of them, right? So if you create a list, then people will know through this numbered list that, hey, there's a certain number here and you need to remember all of those things. You also teach with stories or similes. So you'll see that with the Buddha, that he will teach with similes and stories to be able to help people remember his teachings. And then you also teach in repetitive ways. This is the way to help the mind understand an oral tradition, is you repeat yourself over and over and over and over and over again. So in this 45 volumes of books, there's a lot of repetition. So what this book series does is it extracts and consolidates the teachings into a method that is digestible. So in these longer discourses in the original Pali Canon, they can be very long, and it can sometimes take about 30 minutes to read one particular discourse. And there might be 5, 10, 15 different things that are in there that will help you to learn and understand the path to enlightenment. But it can be challenging to wrap the mind around that. So what this book series does is it extracts it, and now you have maybe 1, 2, or 3 golden nuggets in each individual excerpt from the teachings of the Buddha. So this book series presents it in a way that is digestible. So rather than taking this big, huge bite of pizza and trying to chew on that and making it hard to digest, you can actually take smaller bites, and now you can chew it and digest it more easily. This book series is referred to revealing the hidden because for a long time, the teachings of the Buddha have been hidden, not intentionally, but inadvertently, because these books here that are really big and very large, it costs a lot of money to print these out. And the average person doesn't have the resources to be able to print these out. Like here in Thailand, if you were to print out all 45 books, it would be about 3 months of your salary. And you probably don't have any book collections worth 3 months of your salary. But with this consolidated version, and by loading it onto the internet, we have the ability to share it far and wide without any cost whatsoever. So nowadays, we have certain things that are available to us that didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, so that we can share the teachings far and wide. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, he understood that his teachings would reach the entire world, but it wouldn't be during his lifetime. So here we are 2,500 years later with a perfect environment to be able to share his teachings far and wide in the entire world. That we now have the ability to travel. We can travel very easily. We can go from one side of the earth to the other in about 24 to 48 hours, which wasn't the case during the lifetime of the Buddha. We also have an international language of English, which didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. He spoke a certain regional language that was just isolated to that part of the world, so his teachings couldn't reach the entire world. But now more and more people are learning English, so these teachings can reach the entire world. And we have the internet, which these teachings can now be shared far and wide. Like, look at how far and wide we are. Like, I'm sitting here in Thailand, and you might be in some other distant, far place. And we can share content and understanding and teachings far and wide across the world. We can press a button and we can send a book from one place to the other in an instant, which didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So we have certain technology and abilities to share these teachings that didn't even exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So that's why this book series is titled Revealing the Hidden, because we're bringing forth these hidden teachings in a way that is easily accessible to countless people across the world. So you can access these books from our website. You can download them for free by going to buddhadailywisdom.com. You can print them out if you like. You can take them to a printer, or you can print them out. You can get printed versions here in Chiang Mai at our temple. All you need to do is reimburse us for the printing cost. And then you can also get them on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. From this same website, buddhadailywisdom.com, it has the links there that'll take you over to Amazon. So if you just click on free books from our website, you'll see them all listed there. And then from there, you can go over to Amazon. Or if you'd like to go to Amazon, you can just go to Amazon and either search for my name or search for the name of the book series or anything like that. And you'll be able to access these through Amazon if you'd like to get them there. And then in terms of how this program is conducted, like I mentioned, it's going through all the 12 volumes, volumes 2 through 13, and we're doing 10 chapters per week. So there's words of the Buddha, there's a reference, and then there's words from me to help you reflect on this and better understand it. And you can attend the classes after you've either read the chapters, or maybe you would like to read the chapters after class. You can read the chapters before or after class, or maybe you would like to do both. But if for some reason you weren't able to read that week, you can still come to class, because we're going to be reading a portion of the chapter in the actual class. So don't feel like you can't come to class if you haven't read, because you surely can. But you'll definitely get more benefit if you either read before class or after class, because then you'll be more informed and be able to get help. And where you can't make the live classes on Saturday at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Thai time, they're all recorded and available for replay on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, or on our podcast. Always keep in mind that this is an independent study program, that you're independently journeying on the path to enlightenment. And you'd like to read just maybe 10 to 20 minutes per day. Because if you sat down to read for a whole hour, it's going to be challenging to wrap your mind around all the golden nuggets that are being learned during that time frame. Now, if you're going to read multiple times for an hour during the week to read the chapters over and over, you might decide to approach it that way. But what I noticed is that if you just read 10 to 20 minutes, this is like maybe 1 to 2 chapters, which will take you about maybe 10 minutes to read those, or 20 minutes. It gives your mind time to digest that and reflect on that, because you're not interested to just read for completion and try to hurry up and get to the end. You're looking to read for comprehension. So by reading slowly like that, this will really help you. And you might sit down to intend to read like 20 minutes, and you read the first chapter in about 3 to 5 minutes, and you're like, whoa, that's deep. And you might need to put the book down and really think about it. And this is a wise way to do things, because there were times where I would sit down to read the Teachings of the Buddha, fully intending to read for a long period of time. And then when I would pick up the book, within the first 3 to 5 minutes, I would uncover something that's very deep, and I would just put it down. Like, whoa, I need to step back from this, and I need to think about this, and I need to independently verify whether this is true or false. So by just choosing to read a short time like that and not being attached to it or not cling to it, you'll be willing to put the book down as you need to. And then you can use the videos and the podcast and asking questions as you need. And as you're reading, you would like to independently verify the truth. There's no belief. You're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify and practice the teachings. And at the same time, if you don't already have a daily meditation practice well established, you would like to establish a breathing mindfulness meditation practice and a loving kindness meditation practice. That's what those foundational programs are for. I've helped students to build up those particular meditation practices. And if you haven't done that yet, based on the original teachings of the Buddha, that's why I'm inviting you to go back to the YouTube channel and find the playlist there where you can learn these things. And wherever you have challenges finding those playlists, you can always reach out to me, and I will be able to help you to be able to do that. And then if there's things that you've learned in the past, they may or may not have actually been based on the original teachings of the Buddha. So you might find that you need to set aside certain things that you've previously learned. If you're sitting in a class and everything the teacher is teaching you is exactly the same of what you already know, you're not really benefiting, you're not growing, you're not developing in that environment. So when you hear the words of the Buddha and you're learning what he did teach and what he didn't teach, I'm sure you're going to come across things that if you've studied in the past, you're going to see that they're different than what you currently understand, because now you're going to be studying with the original words of the Buddha, where before you might not have been doing that. So there are certain things that you might have been exposed to that you're going to need to set aside. And that's a really wonderful thing, because right now, if your mind is currently unenlightened and you're learning new things based on the original words of the Buddha, now you have an opportunity to grow and develop and move closer to enlightenment. Whereas if everything you were learning was exactly the same things that you already know, and you know you're not enlightened, then you're not gaining any wisdom to move the mind to enlightenment. So when you're in a program like this, where you're learning with the original teachings of the Buddha, and you're growing and developing, and things are conflicting with what you currently understand, this is an opportunity for growth. And where you're seeing that, just ask questions. If you're not quite sure why the Buddha taught a particular thing, or why I'm sharing a particular thing, just ask questions. How can I independently verify that, David? Or can you help me understand with more clarity what the Buddha is teaching here? And I'll be pleased to help you with any of those kinds of things. And then in terms of your reading, understand that it's not casual reading. It's investigation. It's actively reading. You're reading to understand. You're not reading to just, get to the end of the book. So where you encounter a word that you don't understand, you might need to investigate that with multiple sources, like a dictionary or something like that online. Because one of the benefits that you're learning and developing is not just learning the teachings of the Buddha, but you're going to be learning deeper English, right? If there's certain English words that you don't understand, you'll be able to learn those. And I've written these books in such a way that it's a very common, very basic level of English, but there still might be certain words that you encounter that you don't necessarily understand. Or perhaps that particular word is being used in a way that you don't use that particular word. Maybe you use it in a different way because everybody uses words in a slightly different way. So you might need to pause at different times in your reading and be able to investigate the vocabulary that's being used. So don't assume that the meaning of the words is the same as your current understanding. You're going to need to maybe investigate and look for definitions on certain words that you come across. Don't be concerned with just completing the task of reading and getting to the end and kind of hurrying up and doing that. But instead, take your time and then read for comprehension so that now as you comprehend the teachings, you can actually apply them in day-to-day life. That's where the real benefit is. So if you're just trying to hurry up and get to the end of your reading, it's not actually going to produce the benefit. Whereas if you understand and comprehend the teachings, taking your time and then applying them in your day-to-day life, that's where the real improvement comes from. As you're investigating the teachings of the Buddha, you might notice this zeal or this excitement or this thrill come into the mind. The Buddha talks about this, and you might notice this yourself, that all these years you might have been trying to figure out certain aspects of life and figure out how to solve different problems in your life. And when you're learning the original words of the Buddha and you're getting this understanding of the truth and the natural laws of existence, you might get very thrilled and excited by this. So you might notice this and you might decide to read at times where your mind has the opportunity to calm down because you're looking to keep your mind calm and composed. So if you're reading right before you go to bed, you might notice that this thrill and excitement springs up and now it's hard for you to read. So you might notice that in the morning or in the middle of the day or sometime in the evening before you get closer to bedtime, that this might be a good time for you to study the original words. Now you decide to do whatever you'd like to do and what works, but just understand that there can be this thrill or this excitement that comes up in the mind. So you might decide to do some meditation before you go to bed to maintain your calmness and composure and get a good night's sleep. You might observe that craving arises as you're actually reading, that you're, so thrilled about these teachings and that you're finally getting the truth from the original words of the Buddha, that you might notice this longing, yearning, and this craving to just read and read and read and read and read. And you're going to need to be able to put the book down and be able to let go. So that's why I suggest like 10, 15, 20 minutes of reading is ideal. But be prepared when you pick up the book that in the first 3 to 5 minutes, you might see a couple of golden nuggets that you need to put the book down and think about that for a number of hours or even a couple of days before you're ready to pick the book back up again. And just know that you're always welcome to ask any and all questions at any time during the week. You can ask before class, during class, or after class. And I gave you all those methods where you can ask during the classes, of course. You can post in the Facebook group, you can send private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance. All of that is available to you. And then lastly, these are the websites that you might need in order to make your way to the resources. And you're welcome to screenshot any of this stuff if you like. That first website, that's where it has all the details of the Pali Canon and English study group. So you can go there and you can see a whole outline of exactly what chapters I'm going to be sharing and the specific date that I'm going to be sharing it. So it's kind of like a course syllabus. In addition to explaining to you all about the program, down towards the bottom, you'll see the dates and the actual volume and chapter that I'm going to be sharing in each individual class. And then, of course, our website is a central hub for all of these things. You can get to everything through our central hub of buddha-dailywisdom.com. And then there's the Facebook group that you can also go to and participate there if you'd like to be able to benefit from that. So this is everything that I have to share with you about the actual program itself. Is there any questions that you guys have either in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom that you would like to ask at this point about the program and being successful in the program? You can put that into the comment section, or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions by just unmuting your mic, and we'll be able to hear you throughout the class of Zoom and throughout the live stream as well. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into the actual study group, where this is the way our class will be constructed each week, where we study each individual chapter. And you may or may not have actually studied the chapters for this week yet. And that's okay. Like I said, you can read before class and or after class. So by accessing this book, volume 2, from our website, or getting a printed version in whatever way you'd like, either by printing it yourself at the temple or from Amazon, you'll be able to read the chapters ahead of time. Because what you have in each one of these chapters is you have the original words of the Buddha. That's the first part of the chapter that you'll see. And that's what we'll be studying in the study group. Then what you have is you have a reference back to the original Pali Canon. This is taking you back to those 45 volumes of books. And you can find this through putting it into YouTube, or I'm sorry, into Google or some other search engine. You can put AN 2.46 in this example. And when you put that into the search engine, it'll pull up the original sutta or the original discourse, because the Buddha is typically talking about something before this, and he might be talking about something after this. And if you're interested in seeing that, you can go back and actually do that. Or at the very least, you can confirm your confidence that yes, what David's sharing with you is from the original source teachings of the Pali Canon. But sometimes these reference of AN 2.46, for example, it might be like a part number in some manufacturing facility somewhere. So you might need to put AN 2.46 Buddhism, and that's what'll take you to the actual sutta or the discourse. And then after the reference, you've got some words from me that are going to help you understand how to reflect on this and how to integrate it into your life. The Buddha teaches very clear, very concise, and very precise. You don't need to interpret his words, but it does help to be guided by a dedicated practitioner and a dedicated teacher who has the totality of understanding of all the teachings of the Buddha, and then can share that with you in a way that you can now more deeply understand what the Buddha is sharing with you, and then actually integrate it into your day-to-day life. So that's what I'm doing here throughout these various chapters, that you'll see words from me to be able to help you. And then the way that we do our program, and you'll see me start with this at the very beginning of each class from now on, is I'll just ask for volunteers. That if there's somebody in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this first chapter, and you can see this first chapter is basically a page and a little sliver there, that you can open up your microphone and you can read this chapter. And then after someone reads it, then I will share about 5 minutes of teachings on that. And then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have before we move on to the next chapter. So this is the way a study group works versus all the other programs and courses and retreats where I teach in a more traditional fashion, where I'm sharing with you for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then I'm opening up to questions. And then I'm maybe sharing for another 20 or 30 minutes, opening up to questions. That's more of a traditional way of learning, where this is more like a study group where students have either read before or after class, and now you're coming to class in order to get clarification. It's more of an independent study group versus some of the foundational programs where the teacher is more guiding you through the learning. So is there someone in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this? You can just electronically raise your hand and I'll be able to see that, and then you can open up your mic and then we'll be able to hear you. Okay, looks like Yihang is volunteering. Go ahead, ma'am. Are you there, Yihang? We're not hearing you yet. Maybe 1 second. Maybe my Zoom is not configured properly. 1 second. Yeah, that's what it is. It's my Zoom. Okay, now we should be able to hear you. Let me just switch this back. Or I should be able to hear you. Probably everyone else was hearing you but me. All right, Yihan, go ahead. Oh, still not hearing you. Let's see. You need to unmute there.
Yes, I just muted myself after that.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. We got you now.
Words which should be studied, learned, and investigated in the foremost assembly. And what is the assembly trend in investigation, not in conceited talk? Here, in this kind of assembly, when those discourses are being recited that are mere poetry composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, the monks are not interested to listen to them, do not lend an ear to them, or apply their minds to understand them. They do not think those teachings should be studied and learned. But when those discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being recited that are deep, deep in meaning, word transcending, connected with emptiness, the monks interested to listen to them, lend an ear to them, and apply their minds to understand them. They think those teachings should be studied and learned. And having learned those teachings, they question each other about them and investigate them thoroughly, asking, how is this? What is the meaning of this? They disclose to others what is obscure and clarify what is unclear, and dispel their confusion about numerous misunderstandings. This is called the assembly trend in investigation, not in conceited talk. And what is the assembly trend in conceited talk, not in investigation? Here in this kind of assembly, when those discourses are being spoken by the Tathagata, are being recited that are deep, deep in meaning, word transcending, connected with emptiness, the monks are not interested to listen to them, do not lend an ear to them, or apply their minds to understand them. They do not think those teachings should be studied and learned. But when those discourses are being recited that are mere poetry, composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, they are interested to listen to them, lend an ear to them, and apply their minds to understand them. They think those teachings should be studied and learned. And having learned those teachings, they do not question each other about them or investigate them thoroughly, asking, how is this? What is the meaning of this? They do not disclose to others what is obscure and clarify what is unclear, or dispel their confusion about numerous misunderstandings. This is called the assembly trend in conceited talk, not in investigation. These monks are the two kinds of assemblies. Of these two kinds of assemblies, the assembly trend in investigation, not in conceited talk, is foremost.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here, the Buddha is explaining these two types of communities that are studying certain groups of teachings, certain collections of teachings. You might think that during the lifetime of the Buddha, he's like the only game in town, right? And everybody would be interested in studying with the Buddha. But not everybody understood he was a Buddha, because there's not like a physical characteristic that determines someone is actually a Buddha. Like there's not a mark on the forehead or a twisted ear or something like this that determines this person is a Buddha. But if you understand what a Buddha is, you can actually identify what a Buddha is. That a Buddha is an individual who gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their teachings with countless people for the rest of their life. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. And then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment after their death. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, he was teaching, and countless people started to understand that he was a Buddha as he was getting closer and closer to death. But not everybody understood he was a Buddha. So there were different groups of people, different teachers who were all claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. And the Buddha is making this distinction about these different types of communities or assemblies, that his assembly is trained in investigation, not in conceited talk. That when you hear his teachings, you're interested in learning with his teachings. And they're sometimes challenging to wrap your mind around because you need to investigate them and examine them. But then as you're learning those teachings, that you question those teachings, that you try to ask questions and you reflect on them. Like the Buddha is saying here is, how is this? Or what is the meaning of this? Right? That you look to try to dispel any kind of confusion or numerous misunderstandings. And this is an assembly trained in investigating the teachings, not in conceited talk. Conceited talk would be like arrogance or boastfulness. But then he talks about another type of community or assembly that is trained in conceited talk, not in investigation. And this is where somebody might be learning teachings that is mere poetry, and it sounds beautiful to the ears and it's easy to digest, but it doesn't have those tangible things that are leading to enlightenment, where the teachings of the Buddha are more challenging sometimes to wrap your mind around, especially if you're investigating them, but you have these tangible solutions of what it takes to get your mind to enlightenment. But when you hear these words that are mere poetry, that they're just easy on the ears, sure, it sounds interesting, it's easy on the ears, but there's nothing to investigate and to be able to understand in order to tangibly get solutions to the challenges that you face and move the mind to enlightenment. So he's encouraging his students to not be based in this conceited talk, this arrogance and boastfulness, where the words are just beautiful and sound like poetry, but instead that you wrap your mind around these more challenging teachings and you really dig in and sink your teeth in, and then you ask questions to be able to investigate the teachings, rather than being concerned about any kind of arrogance or boastfulness or conceitedness. Instead, focus on developing through investigation of the teachings. And it's his teachings that are going to lead to enlightenment, not these teachings that are just mere poetry or beautiful in words and phrases. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular teaching. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we'll move on to chapter 2. Is there someone who would like to volunteer for this one? Okay, looks like Yihang is volunteering again. Go ahead, ma'am. Maybe there'll be some others in the future.
One who points out treasure, Ananda, I shall not treat you as the potter treats the raw damp clay. Repeatedly restraining you, I shall speak to you, Ananda. Repeatedly guiding you of what to avoid, I shall speak to you, Ananda. The truly dedicated will stand the test. Regard him as one who points out treasure, the wise one who, seeing your faults, guides you of what to avoid. Stay with this sort of teacher. For the one who stays with a teacher of this sort, things get better, not worse.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is talking about what he does with his students, is that he's pointing out treasure. Anybody who's sharing the teachings that lead to enlightenment, whether it's the Buddha or anybody else, they should be sharing these teachings based in loving kindness and compassion. What loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for misfortune of others. If a teacher, puts a price on their courses and retreats, right away they're inaccessible to disadvantaged beings who need these teachings the most. They're actually struggling with these. Or if a teacher wants money and they're, putting these large prices on their courses, this is to be able to fulfill their desire of more and more and more and more money. But in order to get to enlightenment, an individual needs to practice generosity. So by making the teachings available at no cost, not only is a teacher practicing generosity and loving kindness and compassion, they're also allowing these individuals that are disadvantaged to be able to get access to their teachings, and it's allowing individuals to practice generosity if they would like to, where they can give and share and train their mind to let go. So a teacher who is just interested in helping you to get to enlightenment, and they don't have any expectation of you, they don't want anything from you. They don't want money from you. They don't want to thank you. They don't want any of these things from you. You might choose to do those things, but that's not why they're motivated to share the teachings. The motivation from a teacher to share their teachings should be out of loving kindness and compassion for the world, helping others to be able to get to enlightenment. And as part of that, a teacher is typically pointing out this treasure that the Buddha is talking about. The treasure is the things that you need to improve. So let's just say you're kind of harsh or bitter or hostile. You're not gentle in a conversation with your mother, for example. a teacher's role would be to help you and be able to point that out to you in a respectful way, in a polite way that allows you to be able to improve that. Or let's just say maybe you were being greedy or something like this in a particular situation. These are all treasures that a teacher can point out to you. It's like, hey, there's a diamond over there laying on the ground. There's a ruby over there. There's a sapphire. And a teacher is helping to point these out for you so that now you can learn from that and you can grow. And this person shouldn't have any expectation of you, but only instead politely, kindly, friendly, and respectfully helping you to grow and develop along the path. Of course, it's your responsibility to grow and develop. You're on your own independent journey, but a teacher can point out things, if you're open to those kinds of things, to be able to help you learn and grow and develop. And the Buddha is saying, stay with this sort of teacher because things get better, not worse, because this person isn't motivated by wanting anything or expecting anything from you, but instead they're just interested in seeing you do well and improve. And this is the kind of teacher that you would like to practice with. So the Buddha is saying here that he's going to guide his students. He's not going to repeatedly restrain them, right? That it's not up to the teacher to restrain you, but instead a teacher's responsibility is to help you cultivate wisdom so that then you can restrain your own mind. So just like a potter might constantly restrain their pot that they're working on, the Buddha is saying, hey, that's not what I'm going to do with you. I'm going to speak to you and I'm going to help you cultivate wisdom. And if you can stand the test, meaning if you can stand understanding the difficulties and challenges that you're experiencing, if you can withstand that, then this will help you improve. Because if a teacher is pointing out to you areas of improvement, sometimes students really struggle with this. They have a lot of challenges with this. So this is why I typically don't do this until a student's been learning with me for a consistent period of time. And then even still, I will check with them, hey, would you like me to share something with you that can help you? And when they hear what it is that we're sharing with them to help them, sometimes it can be challenging for the mind to absorb this because there can be ego in there where the mind doesn't want to hear the areas of improvement. So the Buddha is saying it's the truly dedicated that will stand the test, meaning you will overcome this ego where you're pushing away things and thinking that you maybe are perfect, but instead you're letting the teacher point out this treasure of areas to improve. And again, the teacher should be doing this in a polite and respectful way so that the students can more readily receive this guidance and then make improvements in their life. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. It looks like Chrissy has her hand up. If you have a question or if you'd like to read, you're welcome to let me know, Chrissy.
Yes, thank you. I can read, but I do have a question too, if that's okay.
Sure, go for it.
Well, I might even need help figuring out my question. But coming from a Christian background, there was a song or a teaching about the Father molding you like the clay. And it was taught when I was very young that your life or this life is already known. It's like God already knows the plans for you and it's already predetermined. And it's very different from what I'm learning now with karma, and I'm making my choices and determining the results of these choices, and experiencing the results of these choices. But there's a tendency for the mind to go back to those old teachings where the Father does treat, like this is saying the exact opposite of what I was taught. So I'm not sure what the question is, or if there is a question, but if you could just speak a little bit more about the difference in the teaching there and how I could maybe find a little bit of I see that there isn't truth in Jesus or God he isn't folding the clay, like the teaching was the potter forms the clay, meaning he's creating everything that's happening in my life, blessings, punishments. I see that that's not true now. But hearing this, and when I read this, the mind gets a little discontent.
Sure. So if there's any discontentedness in the mind, the mind's craving or clinging to something. So the mind could be clinging or holding on to this teaching in the past. And now when the mind's hearing something different, it doesn't like that impermanence. It doesn't like that change. So you're going to need to let go of these things. And it's good that you can see the true reality that God isn't controlling you. Jesus isn't controlling you. Jesus is dead and gone. And, he's not controlling you, because you can see this truth for yourself. Because if God was controlling everything, ask yourself, who chose to wear those clothes that you're wearing right now? Was it you or God? Or who chose that hairstyle? Was it you or was it God? Who chose where you live? Was it you or was it God? If we subscribe to the belief that there's this pre-planned life for us, then we're stuck. There's nothing that we can do to improve our life. We're just robots. And we know that's not true, right? And this loving God, if you have a belief in God, or you know that God exists, you know that that's not what God would do. So here the Buddha is teaching you that, hey, my role here is not to restrain you. That's your job, is to restrain your own mind. His role is to share wisdom with you by speaking to you and helping you understand what to avoid. And then it's up to each individual to cultivate that wisdom and then make decisions to restrain your mind. Essentially, what he's saying here is you are on your own independent journey, like what I shared. You're on your own independent journey, and I'll share wisdom with you, and I'll be that tour guide for you, and I'll point things out for you. But it's up to you to cultivate that wisdom and restrain your own mind.
Okay, and just a follow-up, in order to restrain our own mind, one needs to practice a dedicated meditation.
That's a big part of it, right? Because your cravings, your desires, your attachments, your longing, your yearning, that's going to pull you towards those unwholesome things. It's going, the mind's longing, yearning to steal or to lie or to have sexual misconduct or any of these other things, or have that harsh and aggressive speech or something like that. Your mind's going to be pulling because of that pollution. And now when you're training your mind in meditation, you're knocking down those pollutions as well as other things too. But the meditation is knocking down those pollutions. And now you're getting better and better at training your mind and restraining it, because your mind becomes more disciplined and you have more control over it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I understand. It is a nice thought, though, to think of a father or God being able to just make these decisions for us.
I have a feeling, though, if that was true reality and that's the way it really worked, you probably wouldn't like it, because you're going to be controlled. Like right now, if your mom or your dad tried to control you to do one thing or another, do you enjoy that?
No.
Exactly. So you wouldn't enjoy it if God did it too, right? And as you know, God isn't a central role in the teachings of the Buddha, but he does teach about this being of God. But the being God isn't controlling you, and you wouldn't like it. So even though you think like, oh, maybe that's a nice thought of somebody else making all the decisions, this isn't actually true reality. So the more you get to understanding true reality, you'll be able to realize like, whoa, it's up to me to cultivate this wisdom and make wise decisions. I can't push this off onto somebody else.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can read this chapter too, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, let me move to the next one, which is chapter 3. I don't see any other questions, so go ahead, Chrissy.
Okay. Rare that a Tathagata arises in the world. Monks, suppose that this great earth has become one mass of water, and a man would throw a harness with a single hole upon it. An easterly wind would drive it westward, and a westerly wind would drive it eastward. A northerly wind would drive it southward, and a southerly wind would drive it northward. There was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? Would that blind turtle come to the surface once every 100 years? Insert its neck into the harness with a single hole? It would be very rare, venerable sir, that a blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years would insert its neck into the harness with a single hole. So too, monks, it is rare that one obtains the human state. Rare that a Tathagata and Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, arises in the world. Rare that the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. You have obtained that human state, monks. A Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, has arisen in the world. The teachings and the discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here we see a story, right? Our first simile. This is where the Buddha's using this simile to be able to help you understand an important point. And he's using this simile of, let's just say the world was completely flooded and there was water in the entire globe. And there's this single ring that is placed on this water, and now the wind's blowing it all around. And then there's this turtle that comes up once every 100 years for air. And what's the likelihood of that turtle inserting its neck into that ring? And remember, this ring is on the whole surface of the earth. Well, even if that ring was in the surface, say the room that you were in was flooded and there's the ring and the turtle comes up once every 100 years, this blind turtle, it's even rare that it's going to put its neck into that ring, right? Even just in your room, wherever you're sitting right now or wherever you happen to be. Well, if you can imagine the entire earth being flooded, it's extremely rare that this turtle will put its neck into that single hole. And the Buddha is saying, okay, this is also very rare that one obtains this human state. It's rare that a Buddha arises into the world. That's what a Tathagata is. And it's rare that his teachings are shining in the world. So essentially what he's saying is, don't allow this human state to go to waste, because in this human state, you can actually attain enlightenment, where it's very rare to be able to come into this world as a human being. But now that you're here in this world as a human being, don't allow it to go to waste. Be motivated and have ambition and enthusiasm to get to enlightenment. It's also very rare that a Buddha arises in the world. There's some places that'll teach you that everyone is a Buddha, but this isn't actually true. The Buddha didn't teach that. The Buddha taught that it's very rare for a Buddha to come into the world. And he oftentimes refers to himself as the Tathagata. This is the way of referring to himself. And this word Tathagata means one who's discovered the truth or one who shares the truth. So he refers to himself as the Tathagata. And he is an Arahant. What an Arahant is this is someone who's purified their mind of the 10 fetters. Every enlightened being is an Arahant, but not every enlightened being is a Tathagata. The difference is that the Tathagata, they've gotten to enlightenment by themselves. They're a Buddha. They have no teachers and no guides. And then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people get to enlightenment during their life. And then they preserve their teachings so that others can get to enlightenment after their death. So you can get to enlightenment, or we might refer to that as an enlightened being. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would refer to this as an Arahant. This is one who's purified their mind of all the 10 fetters. And we refer to a Tathagata or a Buddha as a perfectly enlightened one because they don't have any teachers. They don't have any guides. So their mind is perfectly enlightened. Where an average enlightened being, their mind is enlightened, but we don't refer to them as a perfectly enlightened one. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, anybody who was in existence, it was very rare for them to come into that human existence. It was very rare for them to exist during the lifetime of a Buddha. And it's also very rare for a Buddha's teachings to be shining in the world. So because of this, the Buddha says that you should make this effort to understand what's referred to as the Four Noble Truths. This is the very first teaching that he shares. This is where you understand the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is how you get on the path to enlightenment, is by learning and practicing the Four Noble Truths. And you need to independently verify them. And we're going to see them here in chapter 7. You're going to learn the Four Noble Truths through the words of the Buddha. So if you exist during the lifetime of a Buddha, this is the very best time to live in the world. So not only is it rare for you to come into the world, it's very rare for you to exist during the lifetime of a Buddha. And having done so, you have the best opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment, because a Buddha will have very deep wisdom about what it takes to get to enlightenment. And now you can benefit from learning directly with a Buddha to be able to move the mind to enlightenment. And that's why the Buddha says, okay, you should make an effort to have this breakthrough and understanding the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. This is where he explains in 4 simple statements exactly why your mind's experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and other discontent feelings. And then he explains to you how to eliminate it. And you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment if you didn't understand the Four Noble Truths. That's the very first step in your journey to enlightenment. So let me see what questions you guys have here on this chapter 3, rare that a Tathagata arises in the world. So it looks like somebody has a question. I'm sorry, I can't see your name there. But if you'd like to ask the question, you're welcome to do so by just unmuting yourself.
Hi, sir. It's Mayuli.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Can you hear me?
I sure
Good,
can.
are you? Yes, I can read the next chapter if you like.
Oh, perfect. Okay, let me see if we have any questions on this chapter. I don't see any anywhere. So, yeah, let me go to chapter 4. And how do you pronounce your name again?
Mayuli.
Oh, Mayuli. Oh, hi, Mayuli.
Yes.
I know you.
My first time at Zoom.
Yeah. It's showing, it's not showing your name, so that's why I didn't know it was you, but now, I can associate that. So yeah, you got chapter 4 here.
Okay. The perfectly enlightened one, in the past, future, or at present, are fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths. Monks, whatever arahant, perfectly enlightened one, in the past fully awakened to things as they really are. All fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. Whatever arahant, perfectly enlightened ones, in the future will fully awaken to things as they really are. All will fully awaken to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. Whatever arahant, perfectly enlightened one, at present have fully awakened to things as they really are. All have fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness. The noble truth of the cause of discontentedness. The noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness. The noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand. This is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is saying any Buddhas, any fully perfectly enlightened ones in the past, currently, or in the future are all going to fully awaken to the Four Noble Truths. Because it's such an important part of your journey to enlightenment, everybody and anybody who's interested in getting to enlightenment through these teachings, they would need to know the Four Noble Truths in detail. So that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see, that because the Buddhas are going to need to be able to get awakened to the Four Noble Truths, meaning awakened means gain the wisdom, right? That's what it means to awaken to something, is that you gain the wisdom of it. So if they're going to need that, then you're going to need it too. And the Buddha is saying, okay, since they're also the ones who are learning and understanding the Four Noble Truths, then you're going to need that too. And that's why there should be this effort made, because that's what's going to help you have this breakthrough to finally understanding what's causing the anger and sadness and all those other discontent feelings, so that you can actually eliminate them. If you didn't know what was causing these discontent feelings, you wouldn't know how to eliminate them. So in these 4 simple statements, the Buddha is going to help you to be able to understand this. And I've done this in the classes that I teach in the foundational programs to help students break through to this. But in this program, you're going to see the original words of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 4 of volume 2. Okay, so I don't see any questions unless Mayuli, I see your hands up. If you have a question, I don't know if that was maybe just up from before.
Sorry, that was up from before.
Okay, no worries.
But I can read the next one if you like.
Sure. Let's see what we've got here. All right. So here's the next one. Let me just look at this one for a second. I'm not sure that we need to read this, just in the interest of time, since I used some time of our class to share the beginning of the Pali Canon English study group. I think what we'll do is skip over this one, because what the Buddha is basically saying is that the same thing. Here he's just saying, because he has a fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are, he is the fully perfectly enlightened one. So here, this is essentially the same thing, just in a little bit different fashion. And then the same thing here in chapter 6. Here, he's basically saying, if there's anyone that you have compassion for, which compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, that if there's a friend or colleague or relative that will heed your advice, that it's wise for you to encourage, settle, and establish them in making this breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths. Because it's the Four Noble Truths that finally help somebody to understand what the problem is in their mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. So the Buddha teaches that it would be wise, if there's people in your life that you have compassion for, that you maybe help them to understand these things. So whether it's your children or your life partner, your parents, your siblings, if they will heed your advice and they will be interested to understand, then the Buddha says it's wise to help them. And what this may look like is maybe you're sending them a YouTube video link, or maybe you're getting them a gift, a book as a gift, or something like this. But if your family isn't interested and you've asked them 1 or 2 times and they're just not interested in these teachings, then that's where you need to make sure you don't have craving, desire, attachment and kind of push it on them or try to force it on them. Because if you're trying to force these teachings on people, they're just going to turn away and walk the other direction. You're actually not accomplishing what it is that you would like, which is them to be able to learn and understand the teachings. Because think about you, that if someone puts pressure on you and tries to force you to do something, you're going to walk in the opposite direction. So here the Buddha is essentially saying the same thing that he said before, is that it would be wise to make this effort to develop the Four Noble Truths. And as you develop this, if you have people that you would like to share these teachings with, that it would be wise to do so. But you're going to need to do that without craving, desire, attachment. So we can skip over this chapter for this week too, just in the interest of time, so that we can get to this next chapter, which is chapter 7. But if you guys have any chapters or any questions on chapter 5 or 6, just let me know and I'll be able to answer that for you. So it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, David. I just wanted to know, in this last chapter, for talking to colleagues or friends or people that you care about, would that be if they seek advice from you, or would it be more you see an opportunity where you might be helpful, but you're not sure if they're going to be receptive, as far as right speech? How does that fit in?
Yeah, it can be both of those things. Realizing that that's not your priority on the path to enlightenment, that your goal isn't to go out and, preach the gospel, so to speak, and try to get other people to learn these teachings. Instead, you're always focusing on your own development and your own growth. But where you see opportunity, that maybe somebody asks you directly, like, hey, I notice you're so peaceful and you're so joyful lately. Like, what is that? And you're like, oh, that's the teachings of the Buddha. And then you're like, hey, if you're interested, I can share something with you, right? And here you go. You're probably not interested in being their teacher, because they're not going to see you that way, because you're a family member or a friend, but you can connect them up with resources to be able to help them. Or you might see them struggling with something and you're like, the Buddha has some teachings that would really help you in that situation. Would you be interested in that? And they're like, yes, they might be interested. And then you share it with them. Or they might say, no, I'm not interested. And then and you just let it go and you just move on. But sometimes someone might say yes, that they're interested in something, and you start sharing it with them. And within a matter of a few moments, their ego rises up and they start pushing it away. So you're going to need to recognize that and then just say, okay, well, if you're not interested, that's fine. And just walk away from it, so that way you're not operating through craving, desire, attachment.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. All right, so Mayu Lee is interested in reading chapter 7. If you'd like to go ahead, ma'am, you're welcome to.
The Four Noble Truths. Monks, these are the Four Noble Truths. What for? The Noble Truth of discontentedness, the Noble Truth of the cause of discontentedness, the Noble Truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the Noble Truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness, And what, monks, is the noble truth of discontentedness? It should be said, the five aggregates subject to clinging, that is, the form aggregate subject to clinging, the feeling aggregate subject to clinging, the perception aggregate subject to clinging, the volitional formation aggregate subject to clinging, the consciousness aggregate subject to clinging. This is called the noble truth of discontentedness. And what, monks, is the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness? It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by excitement and desire, seeking excitement here and there. That is craving of sensual pleasure, craving for existence, craving for extermination. This is called the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness. And what, monks, is the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness? It is the remaining less, fading away, and elimination of the same craving, the giving up and letting go of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. This is called the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness. And what, monks, is the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness? It is this Noble Eightfold Path, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is called the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. These, monks, are the Four Noble Truths. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you so much, Mayu Li. So these are the original words of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths. In all the foundational programs and courses and retreats that I teach, I summarize this in a way that makes it immediately accessible to you to be able to learn it, to reflect on it, and then to practice it and actually gain the results of it. The Buddha's words here are very detailed and deep in meaning, and there are certain things that people understood during that time frame that people aren't necessarily understanding with common knowledge today. So this is why I summarize it in the foundational programs that I teach as the first noble truth is everyone is experiencing in the unenlightened state discontentedness. So if the mind is unenlightened, they're going to be experiencing discontentedness. And those are those conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. This is the problem, that the unenlightened mind is going up and down and up and down, that you experience this happiness, excitement, elation, but then that ultimately fades away and the mind starts experiencing the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, or others. And this is the first noble truth, essentially what the Buddha is describing. And I summarize that to help students understand that everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. But here, what the Buddha is describing is his words of the Four Noble Truths, which I'm going to go into detail with you here in a moment. But let me just summarize this for those of you guys that need a refresher, or for those of you guys that haven't studied with me in those foundational programs. So the first noble truth, in a summary version, is explaining that the problem is discontentedness, these conditioned feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. The pleasant feelings are like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. The painful feelings are like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. The neither painful nor pleasant feelings are things like shyness, right? Or uncomfortableness or dissatisfaction. That's the problem. Then the second noble truth is explaining the cause of this problem. The cause of the problem is craving, desire, attachment, longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting the next new shiny object waiting around the corner, thinking that that's going to provide some lasting satisfaction. It's like the mind has this unquenchable thirst that it's chasing and chasing and chasing. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, It gets the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So this is the cause, is craving, desire, attachment, the mind longing, yearning. This is inside the mind pulling towards the objects of its affection. Then the third noble truth is explaining the elimination of that problem. The elimination of the problem is to eliminate the cause. If you understand that the cause is craving, desire, attachment, then the elimination is to eliminate the cause of that feeling. The cause is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. So the Buddha teaches to eliminate that from the mind. And then he gives you the tools and techniques of how to eliminate that through the Eightfold Path. And that's what the fourth noble truth is explaining, that the way leading to the complete elimination of discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. By learning these 8 individual factors and dialing those in closer and closer in your life, then the mind will eliminate its cravings, desires, attachments. And now the mind will experience the peace and the joy. It'll be liberated. You'll notice that you'll have eliminated all those strong feelings because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing it. So the Eightfold Path are these 8 individual factors that you're dialing in closer and closer to get a better and better quality mind. It's kind of like a speaker system, that if you had 8 dials and you dialed those in closer and closer, you get a better quality sound out of these speakers. Well, the same thing's true about the mind, that if you dial in the Eightfold Path closer and closer, you'll be able to get this better and better performing mind. And that's what I teach in the foundational programs, is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and all the other teachings that you need to really build a foundation. But now you need to understand the Four Noble Truths in the way that the Buddha taught them, because there's a level of depth of understanding here that is beyond what you learn in the foundational programs. So this first noble truth that the Buddha is explaining is he's talking about the 5 aggregates, or some people refer to it as the 5 collections or the 5 elements. These are the 5 things that make a living being a living being. A living being is going to have physical form. There's going to be feelings. These are the pleasant feelings. Painful feelings are neither painful nor pleasant. Then there's going to be perceptions. The perceptions are your views and opinions about the world. Then there's volitional formations. These are your choices and decisions. Essentially, a living being is going to have free will. And then there's the consciousness, or the mind. These are the 5 things that make a living being a living being. And as I've taught you, you're not interested in believing these things, but you independently verify this to be true. Because you know that you're a living being, and you know animals are living beings. You can independently verify that what the Buddha is describing is indeed the way to describe a living being, that it's going to have physical form, that there's going to be feelings in the mind, there's going to be certain views and opinions or perceptions. These are may or may not even be true, but there are certain perceptions that you might have. And then there are certain choices or decisions or volitional formations. And then there's a consciousness, or the mind. And then you can take something that you know not to be a living being, like maybe this electronic device that you're listening to this on. You know that this isn't a living being. So now you ask yourself, does it have physical form? Yes, it has physical form. Does it have feelings? No, it doesn't have feelings. Does it have perceptions, like views and opinions about the world? No, it doesn't have those. Does it have volitional formations or choices and decisions? And the answer is no, because it can't make any choices or decisions. Anything that it's doing is based on human beings having programmed it to do those particular things. It doesn't have free will. And then, does it have a consciousness or a mind? And the answer is no. So you can see like a table, a tree, a fan, or a piece of clothing. These aren't living beings because they don't have all 5 aggregates. So what the Buddha is describing here in the first noble truth is that there's these 5 aggregates that the mind clings to, that it holds on to these things. It's wanting these things to be permanent. But now, because everything in the world is constantly changing and shifting, the mind starts to experience discontentedness because of it. So then in the second noble truth, the Buddha is explaining the cause of this problem, of why the mind keeps experiencing this continued existence over and over and over and over again. Well, the cause of discontentedness is craving. This is what's leading to renewed existence. This is why a being continues to be existing in the world over and over and over again, because there's certain things that the mind's longing, yearning for. It's holding on to this world, wanting things to be a certain way. The mind is wanting this excitement and desire. The mind is seeking excitement here and there. The mind is craving for these sensual pleasures. What sensual pleasures are is where you have these 6 sense bases, where there's the eyes, there's the ears, there's the nose, there's the tongue, there's the body, and then there's the mind itself. These are called the 6 sense bases. We're going to study this in detail when we get to volume 9. What the central pleasure is inside the mind. The mind is longing, yearning through these sense bases, wanting things to be permanently agreeable, permanently pleasing. The mind's wanting excitement through these sense bases, and the mind's chasing through these sense bases. You want to see things that are permanently agreeable, or permanently, hear things that are agreeable, or smell things, or taste certain flavors, or certain physical objects to touch the body, or certain thoughts going through the mind. But the challenge is that you live in an impermanent world. So as long as you're craving permanent satisfaction through these sense bases, when you come in contact with things that you see as disagreeable, now you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. So for example, say that you really like rap and hip hop music. And this is like, man, you really like this music, right? It really gets to you. You're, oh man, this is such good music. Well, now when somebody pulls up next to you with maybe heavy metal music or instrumental music in their car, you might despise this. You might be frustrated by this. And this is only because of the craving in your mind. You want to hear things that are permanently agreeable, and you live in an impermanent world. So as long as the mind is craving for sensual pleasures, seeking excitement through these sense bases, you're going to sometimes experience things that are agreeable to you, and you'll get happy, but that's only temporary, because before too long, something is going to come along that you disagree with and that isn't to your liking, that you don't have a certain craving, desire, attachment. You want something else. The mind is getting something that it doesn't want, which is this heavy metal or instrumental music. Essentially, the mind wants what it doesn't have. It can't be comfortable in this impermanent situation. So this is the mind craving and longing, yearning. This is the cause of discontentedness. And the mind can be craving sensual pleasures, but it can also crave permanent existence. It can crave to exist in this world. So when you get close to death, you might be holding on to this world and wanting things to be a certain way. And the mind doesn't want to let go. It's craving this eternal life. So this isn't actually possible because of impermanence. Or the mind could be craving extermination, which this would be someone who's craving to die, right, and commit suicide. So the mind is either craving for existence, to live in this world permanently, or it's craving to die. And in the meantime, it's chasing after all these sensual pleasures. The mind can't be in the middle in the unenlightened state. That mind either is craving permanent existence or craving extermination, or it's craving these permanent sensual pleasures instead of just being in the present moment and being content in the present moment. Essentially, what the unenlightened mind does because of craving, desire, attachment is the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. It always wants what it doesn't have, so it chases after those things. This is the cause of discontentedness. Then the elimination of discontentedness is that if you understand what the cause is, which is craving, desire, attachment, then the elimination of discontentedness is to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. And that's what the Buddha is explaining to you, to give it up, to let it go, to experience freedom from it. And that's how you get free of discontentedness. And then he gives you the tools and techniques of how to become free of those cravings, desires, attachments in the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth is explaining the complete perfect plan of how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, which is the Eightfold Path. And that's what you would need to learn through his original teachings, which I share in all the foundational programs. And you'll see it come up here in this program too, where you'll see his original Eightfold Path. So you're going to need to know this inside and out. It usually takes me 2.5, 3 hours to actually teach it in detail. So that's why it's best for you to go back and see the foundational programs, because when we get to the Eightfold Path in this program, I just ask you, what questions do you have on it? Because it takes so long to actually go through it and teach it thoroughly. So if you go back to the foundational classes, you'll be able to learn that in detail. So this is the Four Noble Truths and the way that the Buddha taught it to be able to help you learn it in detail. Do you guys have any questions here? Looks like Yihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, David. I am not sure about the non-reliance of it on it in the paragraph. Yeah, there's one non-reliance on it. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that like see this feeling coming and then just not give a reaction or something?
He's talking about not relying on the craving, desire, attachment for your pleasant feelings. So like maybe like say you have a craving for chocolate and you can only be happy when you have chocolate. Well, now you're relying on the chocolate for your pleasant feelings. And because of that, that's a conditioned feeling that's going to arise, change, and fade away. And because you can't always have chocolate, some cases you're going to be happy, some cases you're going to be sad. But if you can free your mind of the craving for chocolate, it doesn't mean that you eliminate eating chocolate. You can eat chocolate, but it's the craving, desire, attachment for it, where you don't rely on this object in order to get pleasant feelings, that you can maintain your joy and your happiness without any conditions being met, that this is unconditioned happiness. So in the unenlightened state, you have conditional happiness, that if this condition is met and this condition is met and this condition is met and this condition is met, then I will be happy. And it's only temporary in that situation, so you can't be permanently joyful and happy. But if you can get to this non-reliance on your craving, desire, attachment, you can eliminate it out of the mind and let it go and give it up. Now you can be happy and joyful all the time because you have unconditioned happiness in the mind.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions anywhere for this particular chapter, so we'll move on to chapter 8 if there's someone who would like to volunteer to read this. Okay, it looks like Keely is volunteering. Go ahead and open up your mic, ma'am.
The two-eyed person. Monks, there are these three kinds of person found existing in the world. What three? The blind person, the one-eyed person, and the two-eyed person. One, and what monk is the blind person? Here, some person lacks the kind of eye with which one can acquire wealth not yet acquired and increase wealth already acquired. And he also lacks the kind of eye with which one can know wholesome and unwholesome qualities, blameworthy and blameless qualities, inferior and superior qualities, dark and bright qualities with their counterparts. This is called the blind person. 2. And what is the one-eyed person? Here, some person has the kind of eye with which one can acquire wealth not yet acquired and increase wealth already acquired. But he lacks the kind of eye with which one can know wholesome and unwholesome qualities, blameworthy and blameless qualities, inferior and superior qualities, dark and bright qualities with their counterparts. This is called the one-eyed person. 3. And what is the two-eyed person? Here, some person has the kind of eye with which one can acquire wealth not yet acquired and increase wealth already acquired. And he also has the kind of eye with which one can know wholesome and unwholesome qualities, blameworthy and blameless qualities, inferior and superior qualities, dark and bright qualities with their counterparts. This is called the two-eyed person. These monks are the three kinds of persons found existing in the world. And how, monks, does a monk have attentive eyes? Here, a monk understands as it really is. This is discontentedness. A monk understands as it really is. This is the cause of discontentedness. A monk understands as it really is. This is the elimination of discontentedness. A monk understands as it really is. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. It is in this way that a monk has attentive eyes.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here the Buddha is describing an individual who has a certain amount of wisdom to a certain degree, and he's calling the one person a blind person, a one-eyed person, and a two-eyed person. Then he talks about this individual with keen eyes, right? Well, if an individual is blind, what he's saying is, okay, you can't acquire wealth and you can't see wholesome and unwholesome qualities. And this is actually very detrimental in your life if you're looking to sustain your life. If you can't acquire wealth, Not that wealth is going to lead to happiness, but you need a certain amount of income to be able to sustain your life. And if you're not able to see wholesome and unwholesome qualities, then you're not able to cultivate relationships in your personal or professional life that would be beneficial. So this is very detrimental to an individual if they're a blind person, so to speak. And this comes through a lack of wisdom, that someone doesn't know how to acquire wealth, or they don't understand wholesome or unwholesome qualities. But then as you're training and you're learning more wisdom, you might become a one-eyed person where you can acquire wealth, but yet you can't discern whether somebody has wholesome or unwholesome qualities. And you're not interested in judging an individual, but you're interested in being able to know this through wise decision making. And then the two-eyed person is someone who can acquire wealth and also can observe wholesome and unwholesome qualities. And this is helpful because you'll be able to cultivate personal and professional relationships that are going to be helpful in your life. But then it refers to these students, and every time you see the word monk, you can just insert students, right? And how students? Does a student have attentive eyes? That's what he's essentially sharing here. And he says, okay, to get to these attentive eyes, it would be to understand the Four Noble Truths. This is him pointing to the Four Noble Truths because that's such an important teaching to be able to understand. And that's where you would have these attentive eyes. And now you fully understand through understanding the Four Noble Truths and having this breakthrough of what's causing your discontentedness. So if you don't yet understand the Four Noble Truths, you're going to need to spend some time to learn that, reflect on it, and deeply understand it through reading these books and through looking at the foundational programs where I walk you through step by step to understand in about 45 minutes of how to understand the Four Noble Truths. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, looks like Keely has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, David, I would like to know whether this attentive eyes equals to the ego eyes.
It's not the ego that the Buddha is talking about here. He's just saying, like, you have this keen understanding. You have this understanding that other people may not have, which is you're attentive to the mind. You understand true reality of what's truly causing your discontent feelings. And that's the ideal type of eyes that you would like to have. Sure, the two-eyed person, that's great. You need to be able to acquire wealth and understand wholesome and unwholesome qualities, but you also need to have these attentive eyes to be able to understand the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, I got that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere, so we'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 9. So someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Yihan, go ahead, ma'am.
Wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship. No, on one occasion, great king, I was living among the Sakyans, where there is a town of the Sakyans named Nagaraka. Then the monk Ananda approached me, paid homage, respect to me, sat down to one side and said, "Venerable sir, this is half of the holy life, that is wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship." When this was said, great king, I told the monk Ananda, "Not so, Ananda, not so, Ananda. This is the entire holy life, Ananda. That is wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship. When a monk has a wholesome friend, wholesome companion, a wholesome comrade, it is to be predicted that he will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path."
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is talking to Ananda. Ananda is one of his closest students. Ananda was reported to have been maybe his cousin or his brother-in-law or something like this. He was with the Buddha throughout his whole teaching career, from the very beginning to the very end. And Ananda is credited with having remembered the teachings very closely, and he's the main person who helped to actually document the teachings. So if it wasn't for Ananda and having learned the teachings so closely, we may not actually have learned them and understood them, that he deeply understood them and recounted them shortly after the death of the Buddha. And there was 500 enlightened beings that came together to document the teachings of the Buddha. And after you've gotten to enlightenment, you'll remember what it takes to get to enlightenment. When you learn the teachings of what it takes to get to enlightenment, you'll never forget those teachings. So all those enlightened beings would remember the teachings of what it took to get to their enlightenment. But in terms of remembering exactly what the Buddha said at any given time, Ananda was the one who's credited with having the deepest memory to be able to document the teachings among these other 499 enlightened beings after the death of the Buddha. So here, the Buddha is being reported to have recounted, or Ananda was recounting this report of the Buddha having taught him. And you'll see Ananda show up a lot of times in the discourses because he's the one who's recounting them. So at one time, Ananda was saying to a king that half of getting to enlightenment is to cultivate wholesome friends and wholesome companions and wholesome comrades. We might say wholesome associates. And the Buddha needed to step in and correct Ananda and said, oh, no. It's not half. It's actually the entire holy life. So what the Buddha is saying is that if you cultivate wholesome friendships, that you're going to have a tendency to more likely get to enlightenment, because as you cultivate more and more wholesome relationships around you, you're going to lean towards wholesome things, because the converse is also true. If you cultivate unwholesome relationships, you're going to tend to do unwholesome things. So that's why that previous discourse, the Buddha was talking about the two-eyed person, where you need to be able to see wholesome and unwholesome qualities and cultivate friendships around you without having these wholesome friendships. Whereas if you were spending time with people who are gossiping and slandering and stealing and lying and have really high egos and things like this, then you're going to notice that your mind's going to lean in that direction too. So you would like to cultivate relationships with people who are more in line with practicing the teachings. And it's only an enlightened being who's going to be practicing them perfectly. So you're not looking for the perfect friend or the perfect life partner or something like that, but you're looking for someone who's interested in cultivating wholesome qualities and understands that they need to do the work to do that. Whereas if you're around people who are constantly blaming you for them being angry, this is going to be hard for you to establish right view. If you're constantly being blamed for other people's problems, not realizing that it's them who is causing those issues. So you would like to cultivate friendships with people who are into wholesome things, and then your mind will lean towards doing wholesome things as well. That's what the Buddha is teaching you here. And this is a significant part of the path to enlightenment. He shares it here in this discourse, but he shares it in other parts too, where yes, meditation and all these other things are important, but cultivating wholesome relationships is really important. Because if you have bitter and harsh and hostile and negative people around you, you're going to find it very challenging to move beyond that and into this enlightened mental state. So there might be certain relationships that you need to let go of and move on from. There might be certain relationships that you need to improve, and you're committed to improving those. And then there's going to be new relationships that you create on your journey to enlightenment, where people are only doing wholesome things and you're only doing wholesome things too, so that you guys have a really great relationship together. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 9 of volume 2. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll move to chapter 10. Is there someone who would like to read this? All right, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
The entire holy life is wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship. And how, Ananda, does a monk who has a wholesome friend, a wholesome companion, a wholesome comrade, develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path? Here, Ananda, a monk develops right will, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, measuring in relays. He develops right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in relays. It is in this way, Ananda, that a monk who has a wholesome friend, a wholesome companion, a wholesome comrade, develops and cultivates the Noble Eightfold Path. By the following methods to Ananda, it may be understood how the entire holy life is wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship. By relying upon me as a wholesome friend, Ananda, beings subject to birth are freed from birth. Beings subject to aging are freed from aging. Beings subject to illness are freed from illness. Beings subject to death are freed from death. Beings subject to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair are freed from sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. By this method, Alander, it may be understood how the entire holy life is wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha is saying, hey, when people are learning from me and they consider me to be part of their friends, and they're going to learn this eightfold path that is going to lead to the elimination of sickness, aging, and death, as well as grief, sorrow, pain, displeasure, and despair, that's the discontentedness, that by being with wholesome people, you can learn this, right? So during the lifetime of the Buddha, he was among this community of many, 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 many people who were learning and growing and developing on the path. And having learned and grown and developed and cultivated this wisdom, people were getting to liberation. They were getting to where the mind is peaceful and joyful. They're getting freedom from these strong feelings. And notice the Buddha here talking about this elimination, where you're eliminating those strong feelings. And this happens through maturing. You need to accumulate enough benefits. It's not an instantaneous thing. You're going to see as you learn with the words of the Buddha, where he talks about this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So there's going to be a period of time where you intellectually know what the mind needs to do, but the mind just won't do it because it hasn't matured. It hasn't accumulated the benefits. The mind hasn't released what it needs to release. It's not fully liberated yet. It hasn't fully let go. So you're going to need to be chipping away at this through consistent, dedicated training with your meditation and learning and all those other things. And slowly but surely, the mind will mature and mature and mature and mature before it finally releases the cravings, desires, attachments that are causing these discontentedness. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to be able to get to that point where the mind does mature, and then it ultimately releases the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings. And the Buddha is encouraging you to cultivate these wholesome friends and companions and comrades, which is actually going to lead to your interest and development on the path. And one of the things that people oftentimes do is they make friends in a community like this. Like you guys are in Zoom, you're on Facebook, you can see the people that are coming together to learn these teachings, and you can develop relationships with each other. You can friend each other, you can message each other, so that you can reach out to me for help, but you can reach out to each other as well, because different people have different wisdom about different things. So this is one of the benefits of being in a community like this, where you're able to develop relationships with people around you. And now you have these wholesome friends and companions and comrades that are also interested in learning and developing and doing this inner work to heal from what hurt you, so that you don't ever need to hurt again. That's what the teachings of the Buddha are for, is so that you can heal from what hurt you, so that you never need to hurt again. But what hurts you is within your own mind. You can improve that through cultivating wisdom and through training the mind. So this is chapter 10, where the Buddha is talking about the entire life is cultivation of these wholesome friends and associates, so that you can journey on this path and be influenced in positive ways rather than being influenced by unwholesome things. So any questions here on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do today is just end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for being interested in learning through the original words of the Buddha in our Pali Canon and English study group. And at the same time, invite you to our future classes, because next week we're going to be in chapters 11 in all the way through 20 on this particular book. And you'll see that we'll just start right from the beginning with those chapters. So class usually goes for about an hour and a half. Sometimes it can go a little bit longer depending on how much content there is in the particular class. Sometimes it even goes shorter. I've had some classes that are only about an hour and 15 minutes. But nonetheless, whether it's an hour or hour and a half or 2 hours, it's time well spent, because you're learning with the original words of the Buddha. You're getting the wisdom that you need to completely transform the mind and move it to this enlightened mental state. And if at any point during your week, as you're reading and you're learning with the original words of the Buddha and the reflections that I'm sharing with you, you're always welcome to reach out and get help. And it's important to read the entire chapter, because there's, yes, the words of the Buddha, and I'm teaching you in the class, but I've gone into a level of detail in the book that I'm not able to go into in the classes. So by reading and coming to class, you'll get the full details and be fully informed about what it is in that particular chapter, where in the classes I don't go into the same level of detail that I do in the book. And then, of course, on Sundays, we have the group learning program, which tomorrow we're going to be in chapter 14, which is titled Cultivating Healthy Mental States, Loving Kindness, Compassion, Sympathetic Joy, and Equanimity. And you're always welcome to join that either Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Thai time or 9 p.m., where I'm using this first book of the book series, Volume 1, to gradually guide you through developing a foundation. And you can start in this program or even the Pali Canon and English study group at any time. But the fact that you've started here at the very beginning of the Pali Canon and English study group is very helpful for you. So perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes, either on Sunday or Wednesday, or even on Saturday, or any of the classes and courses and retreats that I teach during the month and during the year. So in the meantime, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day, and perhaps we'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.